In my research essay, I will be exploring the involvement of the Red Cross throughout the events of the Holocaust. I thought I would start by sharing a quote taken from the International Committee of the Red Cross's article published in 2020. It states that January 27th is the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945. For the International Committee of the Red Cross, it also marks a failure, the failure to help and protect the millions of people who were exterminated in death camps. The ICRC has publicly expressed its regret regarding its impotence and the mistakes it's made in dealing with the Nazi persecutions and genocide. The aim behind my paper is to provide a more in-depth view on some of these mistakes. No relief action of any sort by the Red Cross in Germany or the occupied territories could have been undertaken without the approval of the authorities. And of course, German authority refused for the International Red Cross to take part in any kind of intervention when it came to concentration camps. Members of the International Committee of the Red Cross were for the most part not permitted to visit or inquire of the camps. And in the face of such restriction, the ICRC could have made itself heard and called on the conscience of the world, and in doing so, it would have stopped any possibility of acting in Hitler's empire. However, there are claims that it would have also deliberately given up all chances for it to help the victims of concentration camp regimes in any way, and that this would have made it impossible to continue its activity on behalf of millions of military captives. Speaking out in defiance may have only led to further seclusion from the matter. The German Red Cross actually informed the ICRC that it would not give any information or communicate anything about non-Aryan detainees, and it asked it to refrain from asking questions about them. Nazi ideology had infiltrated the German Red Cross during the Second World War, and it became a Nazified organization. Because the ICRC had no control over other Red Cross societies, it was assumed there was little that could be done at the time that wouldn't produce further harm, and that the ICRC was basically powerless to intervene. The International Red Cross would withdraw from more ambiguous situations as a policy statement, which indicates serious human rights or humanitarian problems. And this is something that was especially apparent to me upon studying the role or the involvement of the Red Cross societies throughout the Nazi era. It was important and policy that the ICRC acted in terms of neutrality, and it is widely believed that on a number of occasions the ICRC has been too cautious. The ICRC also insisted that it could not challenge the Nazi onslaught against European Jewry for two main reasons. Firstly, because German authorities considered their treatment of these people an internal matter, and secondly, the protection of even civilian internees had not yet received legal sanction, and the Red Cross was halted by law and authority. The Red Cross, however, did do some good work. Amongst other organizations, the ICRC delivered tens of thousands of parcels of food, medicine, and clothing to civilians in concentration camps, and they also compiled lists of the recipients. But its officials refused to confront the core issues at hand, and the committee's focus was on the distribution of supplies to victims of war. The ICRC also ensued on a small amount of visits to camps, including the infamous Theresienstadt in 1944, whereby Nazi officials completely renovated and glorified the camp into something entirely different than its horrifying reality, to portray to ICRC members that the camp was not for the extreme discrimination and annihilation of Jews. The ICRC paid visits during July and October 1941 to 9 internment camps for the Jews in Nazi-occupied France. And these visits all in one way or more mimic the visit of Theresienstadt. The ICRC did not visit similar centers anywhere else in occupied Europe, nor did it inspect the Polish ghettos or death camps. The Red Cross societies could have done far more in bringing relief and rescue to European Jewry during the years of the Holocaust. In some instances, it had proven helpful and provided assistance, but not in the most crucial moments of need. They helped with providing supplies to victims, and there were attempts made to explore the true context of the camps, but all attempts were let go under the pressure of authority. The ICRC and all Red Cross affiliates had failed to grasp that the plight of the Jews deserved a special attention. And when eventually faced with the unparalleled plan of one nation to annihilate an entire people, the International Red Cross headquarters remained bounded by the organization's pre-1939 standard in remaining neutral. This is viewed as problematic because for a humanitarian organization, with regards to victims of war, this leaves a majority of its subjects out of reach. The organization's options were massively limited by Nazi control, but the notion that it had no moral responsibility to speak out on behalf of the latter because it threatened the good work it was able to do for other prisoners of war is in retrospect absurd. With all moralities aside, the suggestion that the Red Cross societies were unaware of or ill-informed on the absolutely horrifying realities of the Nazi concentration camps is simply false. The primary sources I've chosen to focus on are news reports published during the Second World War. Files from the American Red Cross contain collections of newspaper articles and reports that clearly indicate it was well aware of happenings in Europe. 1 million Hungarian Jews face massacre, Hull says, which was published by the Chicago Sun in 1944. 50,000 Jews put in Nazi prison, die like flies, in the Washington Times-Herald, published in 1943. And 35,000 Jews executed in 5 Polish towns, published by the New York Herald Tribune in March of 1943. All of these news articles prove that the Red Cross societies were aware of the events that were happening. The titles alone are descriptive enough for anyone to clue into what was happening. In 1944, when the final solution was no longer a secret, and with states like Sweden and Switzerland offering protection to the Jews of Hungary, the ICRC still insisted on its political neutrality and refused to help those who were threatened with deportation. At the end of the war, the committee helped numerous prisoners of war, but it played no major role in the rescue of survivors of the concentration camps. Above all else, it refused to engage or participate in times of controversy over political, racial, religious, or ideological natures. To describe the significance and a concrete position that the Red Cross played in the Holocaust is challenging. It remained neutral and inefficient in liberating Jewish victims for many reasons, but mainly because it was limited by Nazi authority and ideology. And in challenging this, it asserts that it may have halted any current or future efforts in aiding victims or prisoners of war. Also, the notion that the ICRC and its affiliates were unaware of what was happening is simply untrue. The vast reports, even in newspapers, prove that the nature of concentration camps were known. Findings warrant an apology, yet when the damage and loss is as extreme and immeasurable as it is in such a case as the Holocaust, what does an apology even mean, and how is it accepted? For the role of the most recognized humanitarian organization to be so bleak is beyond disheartening. Yet we are reminded of Hitler's power and influence and control, and it is through that he was able to keep the ICRC largely in the dark about the true workings of concentration camps. However, it is thought that the ICRC has evolved in unison with the international human rights relations. Since the events of the Holocaust, it has explicitly connected itself to the same fundamental rights recognized by key international treaties. It has strengthened relationships with all national Red Cross societies, as well as with non-governmental organizations and international organizations working on human rights. At the same time, it has received extensive support from public authorities. It has also demonstrated careful consideration of its policies and numerous deliberate initiatives to build ongoing discourse on fundamental rights with public and private individuals in crucial positions.